Hello everyone. The following is a summary of floods, a natural disaster which is profound information about human strength in facing disasters, and at the same time, a call for solidarity to combat the negative effects of climate change. Now, let's go. More than 21,000 people are affected by Malaysia's worst floods in years, most of them in Selangor, taking shelter in relief centers. On Sunday, the 19th of December, Prime Minister Ismail Sabra Jacob announced that the government will allocate an initial amount of RM100 million to repair homes and infrastructure and will provide financial support to households affected family. The Prime Minister said he has directed all ministries to increase efforts to help with flood operations, especially in heavily affected areas, as soon as possible. A visit to a relief center said. Ismail said he visited several centers to ensure the safety of the victims. At least 15,000 people in Selangor have been evacuated to more than 100 relief centers. Mr. Ismail told a press conference that he said the rainfall in the past day was equivalent to the total rainfall in one day. He said the Ministry of Health said it will provide doctors and nurses of all relief center for disinfectant masks and hand sanitizer and medicine. On December 18, 2021 in Shah Alam, Malaysia, chaos is going on with screams, especially in Shah Alam, where rain caused floods that continued to wreak havoc this afternoon, leaving many people stranded on the highway. Speed lasts 4 hours. Some trainees have taken to social media to share their plight with no immediate solution in sight. The intermediate toll plaza was closed as floods hit the location around 2 p.m. Heavy flooding due to heavy rainfall in Buet Tanggi of Bentong in Pah, Malaysia. Government vehicles and property were damaged in Buet Tanggi of Bentong Ping after a night of heavy rain and lightning. Roads were flooded with flash floods due to heavy rain around 10 p.m. The level of flash floods became serious on the night of November 26th. Flash floods in highlands caused water to overflow near Buet Tanggi police station in Bentong P, inundating 30 neighboring houses. Some houses were damaged. National Assembly MP because Bentov Sora Othman met residents and traders affected by floods in Buet Tink Bentong last night. A severe flood occurred in Spain in October 2023, causing a state of emergency and significant damage. The worst affected regions are the provinces of Alicante, Valencia, and Murcia. Urban areas and coastal villages were submerged underwater, creating the evacuation of thousands of people. Infrastructure such as houses, bridges, roads, and electrical systems were seriously damaged. Many areas became completely isolated islands, inaccessible by normal transportation. The flood was caused by a period of heavy rain that lasted for many consecutive days. Large rivers such as the Segura and Jukar have overflowed, causing water levels to rise and creating a risk of flooding in riverine areas. Floodwaters swept away vehicles, caused landslides, and caused traffic congestion. At the same time, government agencies and local organizations have issued flood warnings and guidance on prevention and safe evacuation measures. Fundraising activities and humanitarian campaigns were organized to support reconstruction and provide assistance to those affected. Torrential rainfall has caused water levels to rise significantly, causing landslides and houses being swept away. In August 2018, the southern Indian state of Kerala witnessed a severe flood. Heavy rain lasting for many days has caused flooding in urban and rural areas. Hundreds of people died, and thousands were evacuated. Damage to property and the local economy was also huge. Rescue and rescue forces were deployed to search and rescue people trapped in the floods. Temporary aid stations have been set up to provide drinking water, food, and medical care to evacuees. In April 2014, the city of Tarija in southern Bolivia saw a severe flood. Prolonged heavy rains have flooded urban and rural areas, destroying homes and damaging the local economy. Floods in Bolivia have had serious consequences, including loss of life and property, shortages of food and water, spread of infectious diseases, and the displacement of thousands of people. Flood warning systems, construction of flood protection infrastructure, and emergency response work are important measures to minimize the impact of floods. This man was swept away by floodwaters in northern Malaysia. The villagers tied a rope to the buoy, but failed, and the other side used a long plastic pipe to hold it out to him. He tried to grab it, but impossible. He had to swim out and grab the people's buoy. He reached shore successfully. In August 2010, a terrible flash flood occurred in Ladakh, a highland region located in Jammu and Kashmir, northern India. Flash floods broke the bridge across the river. Flash floods killed more than 200 people and caused serious damage to villages and infrastructure. A flash flood passed through the village and destroyed roads and infrastructure, causing land subsidence and houses being buried in the water. On March 11, 2011, a strong earthquake occurred on the seabed about 70 kilometers off the northeastern coast of Japan. This earthquake created a series of giant tsunamis, spreading throughout the Pacific Ocean. When the tsunami reached the shore, it encountered the city of Kesennuma, located near the coast. The city of Kesennuma, the place hardest hit by the tsunami, was completely destroyed. Buildings, houses, bridges, seaports, and infrastructure systems were wiped out or severely damaged. Thousands of people lost their lives, and thousands more were trapped and lost contact in the dark days after the event. Heavy rain continued on Tuesday, August 1st, in Beijing, Tianjin, and other nearby cities due to flooding. In Hebei province, a man trapped in his car amid rising floodwaters was brought to safety by firefighters in a dramatic rescue effort. A flood flooded the road and swept away the car with its driver. Luckily, he got out of the car and was fine. In a week marked by record-breaking winds and rains, northern India faced severe flooding, extensive property damage, and widespread disruption. The worst affected region is the mountainous state of Himachal Pradesh. Next was the terrible flood that took away people's lives and material possessions, and thousands of cars were swept away to the East Sea. When the water level rises, cars have no place to park, they just follow the water source. This was the 2013 Uttarakhand flood. The fast-flowing water blocked the way across the river, so people had to use big trees as bridges to cross the river during flood days. This is heavy floods hit northern Samar province on Tuesday, forcing immediate rescue operations in several areas of the province, including Kaderman. Some videos spread on social networks. Assembly shows houses almost submerged in Lope de Vega, northern Samar, due to unexpected flooding in the area. Floodwaters rose approximately 25 feet at low level and 10 feet at its highest level, leaving 2,715 families or 9,913 people fled to evacuation centers in Jipapad city, eastern Samar province. This is a scene where floodwaters rise very quickly, and people go to collect firewood from the overflowing water source. Thailand became an ocean flash flood, and tropical wave hit Bangkok on October 4, 2020. Heavy rainfall caused flooding in the city. Cars were submerged in water, causing immeasurable damage and changing the lives of millions of people. The dramatic moment of the flood in Spain swept away many people's cars. An unforeseen disaster. Thousands of people had to evacuate. Some people were stuck in their cars and waiting for the rescue team to come to the rescue. Prolonged heavy rain has created a strong water source that easily pushes trees, cars, and houses away. A flash flood has swept through town, and the floodwaters burst open your door and begin to flood into the house. Flood-triggered landslides in Himachal Pradesh, Kulu, Shimla kill 5 people as heavy rains caused by cloudburst hit Himachal Pradesh, triggering landslides and flash floods, damaging houses and paralyzing life lived normally when the government orders schools and colleges to close. There was a cloudburst in Thunag of Mandi, after which the floodwaters caused landslides and swept away the houses like straw. On the other hand, the 100-year-old Lal pool of Buntar in Kulu was washed away amid heavy rains. A pickup truck stuck in fast-flowing water was promptly rescued by the rescue team. They gave the driver trapped in the car a life jacket to wear before getting him out, with the help of his rescuers, and he was brought to shore in time. Landslides occur, affecting soil, rocks, trees, and the ground, causing destruction to people and homes. Heavy rain causes seawater levels to rise, causing serious flooding to infrastructure and harsh conditions for affected people. Both of these phenomena require the community to be vigilant. The floodwaters were so horrifying that people's houses were swept away, more land was eroded, and roads were cut off, affecting the daily living environment. The consequences of these flash floods are especially severe in rural areas and residential areas near hillsides and mountain areas. Homes washed away by the severe Delton Lake flooding Wisconsin has changed, and this is a flood that swept away cars and homes. Floods in Morocco in November 2014 caused heavy rains that lasted for a long period of time, increasing the amount of water in rivers and streams, causing flooding and flash flooding. Floodwaters flooded residential areas and villages, claiming many lives and causing serious damage to infrastructure and property. Due to prolonged heavy rain, a major flood occurred in the city. A series of cars were submerged in the sea of water. The strong force of the flash flood swept away the cars beyond their tolerance level. Vehicles can be pushed into objects such as trees, rocks, walls, or other hard objects, causing collisions and serious damage. A flood that washes away a car is a scary situation and can cause serious damage to people and property. Being vigilant and complying with flash flood warnings, especially during heavy rains in mountainous areas, is very important to ensure everyone's safety on the roads. The moment terrible weather caused flooding in a rural area in northern India, causing houses to collapse and many people being swept away by the water. Luckily, they were saved. Floods can also cause serious loss. Importance of clean water and electricity. Conventional water supplies are often contaminated or damaged, causing risks of disease and water shortages. A powerful storm has drenched New York views. Incredible amounts of rain and deadly flash floods just north of New York City. Part of the Hudson Valley has seen incredible amounts of rain. May God bless all those who are suffering from heavy rains and floods in this situation. Fortunately for these people, there is no damage to property or people because the water flow is very fast and torrential. With prolonged heavy rains and the collapse of dams, floodwaters overflowed rivers. Roads, bridges, and people cannot react in time when Mother Nature is angry. Prolonged heavy rainfall created a terrible flash flood that left people unable to react in time, causing damage to the living environment. Scenery, trees, and even cars were swept away by the floodwaters with waterline. The whole city was flooded with floodwaters. Even unmanned cars could move, a disaster for the people living there. During this time, heavy rains often occurred and caused rivers, especially as in the central and southeast regions of the country, overflowing and causing flooding. The plains and valleys in this area are often flooded, and rivers overflow their banks, creating large and powerful volumes of water. On March 15, 2023, Turkey experienced some of the worst floods in history, with many provinces seriously affected. At least 11 people died in this flash flood. Currently in the flash flood. During this time, all the roads were destroyed and many cars were swept away. Some affected areas struggled to recover from the devastating floods, and some people even had to move to other places, causing damage to buildings, bridges, and even tree stumps. Blown up. In addition, floods can also have environmental consequences. Floodwaters often carry waste from industrial and urban areas, causing environmental pollution and affecting animal and plant life in the area. At the same time, floods can also cause landslides and mudslides, creating the risk of land failure and great loss of land resources. Our sincere sympathies and prayers go out to the affected people in China who are affected by this severe flood. May Allah bless them with patience, courage, and endurance, and guide them all and guide them to the right path of Islam. The truth is that everything is a result of our sins and disobedience to Allah, because we have all forgotten God is the owner and creator of all the universe, and we worship other than Allah and idols. The creator of everything is only one Allah. Floods can also cause serious loss of life and property. Thousands of civilians had to evacuate and find safe places. The elderly, children, and pregnant women are often the most severely affected groups. In addition, floods also cause damage to the economy. Cars are sunk in the ocean of streets, as agricultural and industrial production areas are devastated, causing people to lose jobs and disrupt the local economy. A flood disaster occurred in a residential area, and local authorities and all relevant parties were ready to evacuate people from the affected area. In residential areas, houses and buildings suddenly become lonely islands in the middle of a raging sea. The water swept away blocks of concrete, cars, and other small objects, creating a horrifying scene. The accumulation of water has led to traffic jams in some areas and submerged the largest markets and most important commercial areas, as water has entered shops and displays, as well as streets turned into lakes due to rising water levels. Many vehicles were swept away. Heavy rain caused some bridges to collapse. Rain also caused many landslides, and collapsed more than 15 buildings. People died in the past 2 days due to heavy rains in several areas in northern India, where a woman died. She and her daughter died in Pradesh on Sunday morning after her house collapsed due to heavy rains. A family also died in a similar accident, and 2 soldiers also died when they were swept away by the flood. This area is called Sylhet. This entire city was flooded. Many people lost their homes and many other properties. The scene of a baby being saved by people from the floodwater. Flash floods hit New York City, flooding subway stations as remnants of Hurricane Ida hit the area, making traffic inconvenient. Violent weather disturbances are occurring in large areas of Malaysia, and cumulus clouds have formed in various parts of the country, accompanied by varying amounts of intense rainfall, accompanied by thunder and lightning. When hail, it caused torrential flooding and extensive damage to property and infrastructure. May God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you, our dear followers. The majority of Malaysia will witness during this period. Recently, intense weather instability, extreme weather, and catastrophic floods occurred in many places, causing heavy damage to property and infrastructure. Floods began after heavy rains everywhere. Climate change is a change in the climate system, including the atmosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, and lithosphere. A disaster experienced severe flooding due to prolonged rainfall. The streets of the capital Uruguay turned into streams, floodwaters inundating many areas. The huge water level has flooded hundreds of cars, forcing local people to fight against the water, trying to save their property and valuables. In Washington, river water rose and houses were flooded, United States. People here were urgently evacuated. Heavy rain flooded the Pacific Northwest, causing river levels to rise and causing flooding on December 5, 2023. Floods hit seriously in Turkey after heavy rain. Meanwhile, electricity systems, transportation, and other infrastructure are seriously affected. Trees were downed, power lines were damaged, and some neighborhoods were completely cut off. All efforts are directed towards overcoming the situation and ensuring the safety of the people. The lives of the people seemed to pass peacefully and peacefully. But on a day of prolonged showers, everything changed. Floodwaters swept across the countryside, inundating all the houses, pitifully for the livestock that had no place to live. The camera recorded a close-up of the floods in Poland on a summer morning. The rain poured down non-stop, creating a large amount of water pouring into Poland. The river flowing through the area began to overflow its banks, along with other streams and forest ponds. Water quickly flooded the roads. Powerful currents swept away everything in their path. Residents in the area were surprised by this situation. They began to evacuate urgently to find a safe place. However, not everyone can move to higher locations in time. Some people were trapped in houses and high-rise buildings as floodwaters quickly filled the roads. Cars were flooded up to the ceiling, with no way to escape. Floodwaters suddenly flooded the fields, drowning the crops and flowers that people had planted last month. People's houses and properties were swept away, shattering their dreams and settlements. Many cars were also swept away by the floodwaters. The floods in Greece have caused serious and heartbreaking consequences. Prolonged heavy rain and land subsidence have contributed to a dangerous situation. Rivers overflowed their banks, washing away everything in their path, submerging homes, destroying infrastructure, and causing loss of life and property. Images from flood-affected areas in Greece makes people's hearts flutter. Streets were flooded, buildings were heavily damaged, and people's belongings were swept away by strong currents. Agricultural areas were submerged underwater, destroying the economic foundations of many farming families. The scene of people struggling to find ways to save themselves and their families from danger is truly heartbreaking. Lisbon floods caused serious damage to people and property. Public works, roads, bridges, factories, and farms were destroyed or damaged. Rescue teams and relief forces have been deployed to help people and search for missing people. Flood warnings and states of emergency continue to exist as water levels remain high and continue to rise. As people and authorities try to cope with the aftermath of the flood, recovering and rebuilding damaged areas will be a huge and time-consuming challenge. Floods can cause severe water and food shortages. Low-lying plains and farmland became a maze of water, disrupting food and water supplies. In particular, rural areas and poor communities are often the hardest hit, as their resources are destroyed and they do not have enough resources to recover. In recent days, Germany has witnessed a devastating flood. The flood started in the first days of the month and has spread throughout all regions of the country. In particular, riverine areas and along major rivers such as the Rhine, Moselle, and Elbe were severely affected. Nearby cities and towns were submerged in floodwaters, with buildings, houses, doors, and infrastructure were seriously damaged. Main roads were flooded, traffic was paralyzed, and travel became very difficult. Bridges and railways were also destroyed, greatly hindering rescue and providing food and water. Floods caused an empty bus to be swept away by the raging waters of the Beas River in Himachal Pradesh, northern India, after heavy rains and flash floods. Additionally, floods can also cause destruction, significant for the village's infrastructure. Sewers are overloaded, leading to flooding and poor circulation. Bridges can be washed away or damaged, blocking traffic and isolating areas. A disaster occurred when floods raged in the countryside, causing great damage to the people living there, a huge loss of property, houses, and vehicles. The streets are now flooded with water. People in flood-affected areas must evacuate urgently to avoid danger. The woman and her dog were rescued by the rescue team from drowning from the recent flood. Let's also learn from this story. Let's cherish our solidarity and love. Always be willing to help those around us in difficult times. And remember that no matter what challenges come, strength and faith in the future will help us overcome them. A flood scene that no one could have expected. Hundreds of cars and people's possessions were submerged by floodwaters. A huge economic loss, residential areas and streets. And infrastructure may be flooded, causing property damage and power outages. Agricultural areas may also be affected, causing loss of crops and the agricultural economy. On August 27, 2021, the people of the island nation of Dominica witnessed a terrible flood, causing serious consequences and loss of life and property. This was one of the worst floods in the country's history. The flood began due to the impact of a powerful storm from the Caribbean Sea. This storm brought heavy rain and strong winds, affecting the entire island of Dominica. Heavy rain continued for several consecutive days, causing rivers, streams, and forest ponds across the country to overflow. In particular, the eastern region of Dominica was the worst affected. The human consequences were sad, with more than 30 people killed and many others missing. Search and rescue efforts were urgently deployed to find and rescue people trapped in flooded areas and ensure the safety of the population. At the same time, thousands of people had to evacuate to avoid danger and find a safe place. This is one of the worst floods in Malaysia's history. The flood began due to the impact of a strong storm from the East Sea, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. This storm made landfall in northeastern Malaysia, causing heavy rain for many consecutive days. Rivers and reservoirs across the country quickly overflowed, exceeding their carrying capacity, leading to overflow and flooding. The worst affected provinces include Selangor, Kelantan, Perak, and Pahang. The consequences of the flood are staggering. Residential areas were submerged in water. Many houses were destroyed or flooded, cutting off traffic and basic infrastructure. Electricity, water, and telecommunications networks were seriously disrupted, paralyzing the daily activities of the population. Thousands of cars were sunk in the sea. In July 2021, people in Germany faced an incredible flood, causing serious consequences and loss of life and property. This is considered one of the worst floods in the history of this country. The consequences of the flood were terrible. Residential areas were submerged underwater, rivers overflowed and swept away scores of houses, causing destruction and devastation. Streets, bridges, and transportation infrastructure were heavily damaged, hindering movement and rescue. Telecommunications, electricity, and water sources were also interrupted, paralyzing the daily activities of the population. The economic consequences of the flood were also huge. Many stores, businesses, and farms were destroyed or suffered heavy damage. Manufacturing and industrial facilities were also paralyzed, causing job losses and adversely affecting the local and national economy. Heavy rain continued for several consecutive days, causing rivers, reservoirs, and forest ponds to overflow across the country. Search and rescue operations were urgently launched to rescue the people trapped in flooded areas. At the same time, thousands of people had to evacuate to avoid danger and find a safe place. This flood caused human, property, and economic losses. This is an important reminder of the importance of investing in flood warning systems and flood protection infrastructure. The consequences of the flood were terrible. Residential areas were submerged underwater, rivers overflowed and swept away scores of houses, causing destruction and devastation. Streets, bridges, and transportation infrastructure were heavily damaged, hindering movement and rescue. Telecommunications, electricity, and water sources were also interrupted, paralyzing the daily activities of the population. In August 2021, Rize province in northern Turkey experienced a severe flood. This flood has caused significant damage to the lives and properties of people in the area. The main cause of this flood is heavy rain that lasts for a short period of time. Heavy rainfall has caused rivers and canals to overflow, creating strong currents and flooding residential and rural areas. The scene during this flood was flooded residential areas, houses, and streets. Rising waters swept away construction materials, vehicles and furniture, and a series of cars were submerged in floodwaters. Main roads were divided, making it difficult for people and rescuers to move. Cars were swept away by water and land in a flash flood. The pressure and speed of water and soil can cause serious damage to a car and hinder its ability to move. The vehicle can be pushed into other objects such as trees, rocks, or other hard objects, causing collisions and serious damage. However, not everyone can promptly move to higher locations. Some people were trapped in homes and high-rise buildings as floodwaters quickly filled roads. After the floods receded, heartbreaking scenes of destroyed homes and lost property emerged, become obvious. The local community and charity organizations unanimously support each other to rebuild and stabilize life. Scenes during a flood in India can include rivers overflowing their banks and flooded streets and residential areas. Homes, shops, and infrastructure were flooded, causing property damage and power outages. People may be isolated and unable to move due to rising waters and blocked roads. This flood has caused serious and heartbreaking consequences. Prolonged heavy rain and land subsidence have contributed to a dangerous situation. Rivers overflowed their banks, washing away everything in their path, submerging homes, destroying infrastructure, and causing loss of life and property. Thousands of cars were flooded and drifting on the road. It was an amazing sight. The scene during a flood in China can include thousands of flooded homes, neighborhoods, and infrastructure. Rivers overflowed their banks, sweeping away houses, vehicles, and furniture. Streets and main traffic routes were cut off, making it difficult for people and rescuers to move. In addition, floods also cause power outages, damage to agriculture, loss of crops, and endanger people's lives and property. When heavy rain lasts or a storm hits, the amount of water in these rivers can suddenly increase, causing flooding. Provinces and areas surrounding rivers are at risk of being affected, especially riverside and valley areas. China has faced many floods that cause serious damage. However, the Chinese government has introduced many measures to minimize the impact of the floods and provide support to those affected. Rescue teams were deployed to move people to safety and provide necessary supplies. In August 2021, Turkey witnessed a terrible flood, affecting many provinces and cities. The worst affected areas include Rize Province, Trabzon Province, and Istanbul City. The flood occurred due to prolonged and overwhelming heavy rain in the area for a long time. The consequences of the flood were very serious. Dozens of people were killed and hundreds more injured. Roads, bridges, and infrastructure were destroyed or submerged, creating great difficulties for travel and relief. Many residential areas, shops, and businesses were flooded or destroyed, causing loss of property and people's lives. Greece is facing a phenomenon when a storm hits the country, causing heavy rains, causing massive floods, breaking dams, washing away bridges and roads, and rolling cars onto the roads. The historic storm flooded much of the country's relatively flat plains. Rainfall exceeded 800 millimeters in less than 48 hours, exceeding the record in Greek history. People in some areas had to take shelter on rooftops to avoid floods higher than 2 meters. Heavy rain lasted for many consecutive days, causing rivers, streams, and forest ponds across the country to overflow. Residential areas were submerged in water, and many houses were destroyed or swept away. Rivers overflow, causing flash floods and landslides, moving rocks and trees. Roads were destroyed, cutting off traffic and hindering access to affected areas. The electricity and telecommunication systems were also interrupted, paralyzing the daily activities of the population. People are having to bear the burden of wading through floodwaters. Roads are destroyed, cutting off traffic and hindering access to affected areas. The electricity and telecommunication systems were also interrupted, paralyzing the daily activities of the population. The latest information from July 21, 2023, is that heavy rainfall caused major flood disasters in 26 Chinese provinces, with more than 11 million people losing their homes. But people also suspect that the government is also secretly discharging. The water in the dams is not yet full, making the flood worse. Rivers also have strong water levels higher than the warning level on July 26th, leading to people's lives being in danger. Forecasting even more heavy rain in these areas, the meteorological team has posting a yellow alert level is the second alert level in a 4-level warning system, which means the rainfall has reached 50 mm or more in the past 6 hours. Specifically, the provinces of Hunan, Huzhou, Hubei, Sichuan, and Jiangsu will have heavy rain within the next 24 hours. Dams, roads, and transportation systems are destroyed or submerged in water, causing serious obstructions. Important for movement and relief. Thanks for your watching. Hope you have time to feel about climate change. Please like, share, and subscribe to get more of our updates every day. Goodbye and see you again.